What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burnett, and it is time we talk about the Florida Gators 2024 schedule. Before we get into it, though, if you're going to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I post. But let's dive right into it. The Florida Gators have, I think, pretty easily the toughest schedule in college football this year. It's a relatively tough slate through the first 7 games. I think if they can get through those 7 games, with a couple of losses, then they look pretty good heading into the backstretch. But their final 5 games are likely to all be against teams that are in the top 15, or certainly in the preseason top 15. We'll go over each of those teams as we go through this, kind of jumping through the whole schedule team by team of who they're facing. And that starts with week 1 in their beginning of kind of a tour of Florida this coming season against the Miami Hurricanes. The Hurricanes were just 7-6 last year, but they had some questionable losses. Obviously, the one that stands out is the one against Georgia Tech, where they did not kneel down the ball when they should have to win the game. They turned the ball over, and the Yellow Jackets ended up getting a win. Among other losses last year that could have been wins, that was the strongest for the Hurricanes. But they bring in Cam Ward, the quarterback from Washington State, who was in Heisman consideration last year. So that should add a jolt to this offense. And in my initial thoughts, they're also bringing in Damian Martinez at running back, and Xavier Restrepo will remain at Miami this year as a target for Ward to throw to, one of the best receivers, certainly in the ACC. You look at this as kind of game number 1. You think maybe it takes time to mesh. There's obviously a lot of time in spring ball and in upcoming summer, training camp and all that stuff. And so I don't know how much that'll be. It is different playing in an actual game together, but we'll have to see how Miami looks. The Hurricanes also have the number 11 rush defense. At least they did last year in college football, so that'll be tough. That one's kind of a toss-up. The fact that it's at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium at the Swamp lends me a little bit to lean toward the Gators in that one. But their first real surefire win, really, I think, honestly, the only one on their schedule is week 2 home against Samford. It's honestly not really worth going into that one, an FCS opponent that the Gators should be able to handle comfortably. Then week 3, they get Mike Elko in his first season at Texas A&M. They're hosting the Aggies. Aggies were 7-6. This is Elko's first big road test. He hosts Notre Dame in week 1, and then has this as a road test, so that'll be something to look for. They have defensive transfer, an edge rusher, Nick Scourton from Purdue, and then Connor Wiegman had a 61% completion percentage, threw for almost 1,900 yards and 16 touchdowns. I think this is also a winnable game. I think it's possible that the Gators do start 3-0, which would honestly be huge for them with what is coming up in the rest of this slate. Week 4, they travel to Starkville, Mississippi to face Mississippi State. The Bulldogs were 5-7 last year, but they bring in a 1,000-yard receiver transfer, Kelly Akorai from UTEP, and they also have a top 35 pass defense. The Gators did a pretty good job, Graham Mertz at quarterback, of passing the ball before he was hurt late in the season against Missouri. So I think this is also a winnable game. Again, these kind of really the theme of what you'll see through these first 7 games is they're all winnable. The Gators are not a team that went 2-10 last year and it just doesn't seem like they can win anything. They went 5-7. They had some good wins in there, and they really also stayed in a lot of games. They didn't really get blown out outside of a couple of games. They kind of hung around in most of their games last year, even though they did have 7 losses. Week 5, the second game against a team from Florida, they face UCF at home. The Knights were 6-7 last year. This is where an issue could pop up, though. The Knights had the number 4 rush offense and kind of leading that to the number 8 total offense. The Gators were 79th in rush defense. So I think kind of when you look at matchups, this could be an issue for the Gators. Even though it is at home, I think this is a game they could lose. And the Knights are led by running back R.J. Harvey with over 1,400 yards last year. And then they bring in Arkansas quarterback K.J. Jefferson that should add a kind of secondary dynamic aspect to the offense. Week 6, they go to Tennessee, who has built up a lot of hype. They went 9-4 last year, which is a very, a solid season. It's not phenomenal, but it's a solid season. Nico Iamaleava has picked up a lot of hype because of the Citrus Bowl that he had. He had a big Citrus Bowl, accounted for 4 total touchdowns. The Volunteers, kind of like the Knights, had the number 9 rush offense, so back-to-back weeks against top 10 rushing offenses. They also add wide receiver Chris Brazel from Tulane. They're going to have a new look defense. They return only 2 starters, but in this kind of transfer portal era where coaches are pretty adept at filling in the pieces and making changes, I don't think that'll be a huge issue. Then week 7, the Gators host Kentucky, one of the teams that they lost to last year. This is, I think, a pretty good recipe for being able to get a bounce back. The Wildcats were 7-6 last year. Might be hard to move the ball, though. Top 20 defense that returns 9 starters and also adds linebacker Jamon Dumas-Johnson from Georgia and cornerback DJ Waller Jr. from Michigan. So the Kentucky defense should be very strong again. I think from looking at who they have coming back on defense and the additions they make, this could be a unit that could be even better. Again, already a top 20 unit last year. I think they could be even better and could lead the Wildcats to an even better finish than their 7-6 record last year. They also, on the offensive side of the ball, bring in a couple of additions that I really like. Brock Vandegrift from Georgia, who is behind Carson Beck, now will have an opportunity to be the guy. And kind of similarly, Chip Trayanum, the running back from Ohio State, was behind Travion Henderson. He's now going to Kentucky, where he'll probably have more of an opportunity to be the guy, or at least split reps in that backfield. So this Kentucky team is a team that I like. Looking at those first 7 games, the first 3 home games, I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say that the Gators get through those unharmed. They go through 3-0, and I think they also beat Mississippi State on the road. So 4-0, that could be huge, again, with what they have at the end of this season. I think UCF and Tennessee are both losses, and I think in a very close game, this is one where if it's in Lexington, I would probably give the edge to the Wildcats, but I think the Swamp proves to be a good advantage here, and I think the Gators beat Kentucky. So they're 5-2 heading into their just gauntlet of a late season slate, and here is what that looks like. Week 8, Georgia Bulldogs, the rivalry, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party in Jacksonville. The Bulldogs were 13-1 last year, only missed out on the playoff by losing the SEC championship game by 3 to Alabama. Again, they're the top team, and also, interestingly enough, they add running back Trevor Etienne from the Gators, so a little bit of not only the rivalry there, but a little bit of, you stole our guy, let's see if we can go out there and beat you, but I really don't see them having much of a chance. And similarly, the next week at Texas, Longhorns were 12-2 last year, obviously won the Big 12 and made the college football playoff, losing to Washington by the slimmest of margins, really. A late game heave by Quinn Ewers did not find the target. So obviously Ewers comes back at quarterback. Isaiah Bond, who was really the hero for Alabama in obviously the game against Auburn, 4th and 31, and then had a huge drive against Georgia in that SEC championship game. So he comes in, and they also have the number 3 rush defense with 7 returning starters. They have some additions, a couple guys from Arizona, defensive tackles, Taioa Lee, I think, hopefully I'm saying that right, Savea, and Bill Norton from Arizona, linebacker Trey Moore from UTSA, and cornerback Andrew Mukuba from Clemson. Those are all really good additions to shore up that defense. I'll dive into that more when I do a video focusing on Texas, because I think they are a strong contender outside of the common picks. I mean, they're a top 4 team. You have Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, and Texas. I think those 4 teams, if it was still a 4-team playoff, I think those 4 teams would be pretty much shoo-ins for it. And then the next 2 weeks, you have home against LSU. They were 10-3 last year. Home against Ole Miss, 11-2. Both teams have strong offenses. The Tigers, I think, will take a step back this year. They do a good job of kind of retooling in that offense. They always have great wide receivers. No more Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas, but they have other guys that can step up. Gone is Heisman winner Jaden Daniels at quarterback as well. But I think Brian Kelly will still have this team in 10-win territory again this year, which will probably be enough to get them into the playoff. Maybe 9 wins, and if they get 9 wins, they're probably just on the outside looking in. Ole Miss has a really strong offense. They have their quarterback Jackson Dart coming back. Defense makes a couple of additions: Walter Nolan from Texas A&M and Princely Uman-Melian from Florida as well. So just like Georgia, another addition of a former Gator starting, being a high-profile player going against the Gators. From those two games, I see them splitting. I think they lose both of the games to Georgia and Texas, so they drop to 5-4. And then I think they're able probably to beat LSU, and I think probably lose to Ole Miss. So that means going into their game against Florida State, they're, by my projections, 6-5, and against those Seminoles, 13-1, a preseason top 10 team. Quarterback DJ Wagalele from Oregon State coming in, and the Seminoles also have a bunch of transfers. I talked about these guys in a little bit in the video where I went over my top 10 preseason teams and then listed off 11 through 25. So if you want to know who the Seminoles are adding on the defensive side, check out that video. I'll probably pop it up here, the thumbnail, and maybe link it in the description. But kind of breaking down this whole schedule, again, I mentioned it in the opening. It features 5 games. Their final 5 games are all against, current top 15 opponents, and I think probably likely top 15 opponents. They get a tour of Florida along the way. I have them, I guess, by my projections, only going 1-2 in that. And their first 7 games, even, they have 3 more games against likely preseason top 25 teams. Tennessee will be a preseason top 25 team almost certainly. I think Miami and Texas A&M will also have a chance to crack the rankings. And I think Kentucky, there's a chance that the Wildcats are ranked when they face the Gators. So it's honestly a strong possibility. And who knows, if UCF can get off to a strong start, maybe they're ranked as well. I think they've got a good team there in the Big 12. The Gators could have, right now, it's almost guaranteed they'll have 8 ranked games. I think it's very likely they could have 9 or even 10 games against ranked opponents. I don't know if we've ever seen a schedule like that in the history of college football, apart from where, back in the day, maybe where teams, there were less teams, and so the best teams would more often than not play against each other. This is, again, like I said, probably one of the toughest schedules in college football history. What do the Gators look like? Just kind of breaking them down quickly here. Quarterback Graham Mertz led the SEC with nearly 73 completion percentage, 2,903 yards, 20 touchdowns to 3 INTs before, again, the collarbone injury against Mizzou. Running back Montrell Johnson Jr. should lead the way in the run game. And then a couple of good additions on the defensive side of the ball. Pup Howard from South Carolina, the linebacker, and the DB Asa Turner from Washington. The Gators were kind of the middle of the pack in everything. So and they have a good amount of starters coming back this year, so it's an opportunity to potentially take a stride. They do lose a couple guys like ETN, like Uman-Melian. Overall, I think this is a team that could take some steps forward. Will it be enough, though? Will what I project to be a 6-6 finish be enough to save Billy Napier's job? I don't know. He's in his 4th season, or in his 3rd season, and I think the Gators probably need to go 8-4 for him to stay in Gainesville, and I think that is a tall task against this schedule. But let me know your thoughts on this schedule and what you think the Gators' record will be. But if you've enjoyed, thank you for sticking around, watching this video. That's all for today. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, College Football Talk, signing out. Peace.